So, our first study in making a plan is a game between Magnus Carlsen, who I've sparingly featured throughout this course, but at times he does things that, while are very brilliant, are also very understandable and accessible for an intermediate player like yourself, or a beginner player like yourself, or a grandmaster player like yourself. Maybe you're a grandmaster, just bought my course for, research. So I've used Magnus sparingly because I wanted to use mostly my games, but sometimes he does things that are kind of straightforward, but also very, very effective. So here Magnus has a game against Vahap Sanal, who I believe is a Turkish grandmaster. I hope I have that right. You know what, for the sake of being 100% correct, I just want to... yes, Vahap Sanal is a young Turkish grandmaster, and he's 24 years old. Wow, he's younger than me. Amazing. Kind of looks like me. We have the same glasses. Anyway, Magnus is playing white here. Now, look, as I mentioned in the intro to this chapter, making a plan in chess is going to combine elements of everything else in this course. Making a plan will be determined, the plans will be determined by whether it's a closed or open position, where the kings are castled, whether they're not castled, what the pawn structure is. So all of these elements kind of have to be met first, and as you play more and more chess, you are going to know the best plans to make in certain positions based on all of those prerequisites. For instance, think about it. Imagine Magnus has this position, like similar position, 10 times in his career, where there are no e-pawns. This looks like it was some sort of maybe exchange French defense with d4, d5, and then take, or it looks maybe like it was some sort of Ruy Lopez. So imagine Magnus plays a pawn structure like this, 7 pawns each, no e-pawns, queens, rooks. Like, of course he's gonna know what to do because he has the experience, right? So you build this up over time as well. There's a lot of elements that all combined together will help you in making plans. Now, first things first, it's 7 pawns each. They are the same pawns. It's queen, rook, bishop, knight, queen, rook, bishop, knight. Couple of things right away. Bishops are of same color. So they're same color bishop. Kings are relatively similar in quality. What does each piece even want, right? Is there any way to create any sort of attacks? Well, white's queen is better than black's queen. White also will play rook to e1. Now, there are multiple plans in this position, One example of a plan is a4, a5, targeting this area of the board, looking to maybe bust open over here, rook a8, and so on. That might be very reasonable, honestly. I quite like this move, a4. Black might just respond a5, though, and then you have to start thinking about, do I play b4, and then what happens to my center? Well, if I take, then this is not very good. So in chess, it's about proving yourself wrong rather than proving yourself right. For instance, here there's a way for white to maybe start an attack. g4, right? You gotta think, oh, g4. Okay, the knight goes there, then queen takes pawn. Oh, that means g4 is a good move. No. You have to prove yourself wrong in chess. You do not have to prove yourself right in chess. Of course, if knight d6 occurs, then you go here. My grandma had wheels, she would be a bicycle, right? I mean, like g4, oh, if the knight comes here, I'm going to win the knight. But that doesn't mean that g4 is a good move. What if just g4, knight h4, getting closer to your king? Have you helped or damaged your position? I mean, that's all the things that you have to do in chess. You have to come up with an idea, evaluate the ensuing position, make a decision. I think g4, knight h4 is bad for white. Magnus in this game plays queen c6. A move that targets 4 things at the same time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Only one of those is actually a threat, the c7 pawn. Now, he knows his opponent's response. His opponent is probably going to have to defend or else just go down a pawn. So the opponent goes here. Now, again, Magnus can go knight f3, knight e5, improving his position, but he hasn't moved a certain piece, so he just takes the full file. Just a full improvement of his position. Now, at some point, he will likely get his pieces in and probably try to start attacking these pawns. That's where it seems like most of this game is going to take place. Magnus might try to use this flank pawn idea. He's going to leave everything else as it is. There's no need to go here yet, and he's going to hunt in this part of the board. Black plays King g7. Black can also play the move h5. There's multiple options. I believe I included this move just as a hypothetical. But king g7, and now Magnus plays knight f3. And while Magnus could play bishop e5 and knight e5, and all those moves are good. Knight e5 is a nice move. Remember a long time ago I told you about this? Well, there it is. g4. Why is Magnus able to do this? More active queen, more active rook, tangible targets in the opponent's position, and the opponent's most powerful pieces are restricted. Now, in this position, we talked about knight h4 earlier. Magnus only played g4 after playing knight f3. I told you g4 knight h4 doesn't suit black, doesn't suit white because the knight is very passive. But the first thing that he did was move his knight and then do this so that this move can be met with zigzagging into the center of the board. What about this trade? And then giving a check. Maybe, yeah, that looks kind of nice. But then what's your follow-up after check? You never want to end a calculation on your move. So for instance, unless it's checkmate. For instance, here, if you're looking at making a plan and you want to go here, here, check, boom. What? What about the opponent? Knight h4, bishop e5, and then what's the opponent going to do? And if we get to that position, well, now what? Like, what's the idea now? The problem with a lot of intermediate players, the problem with a lot of chess players, I mean, even title players, right? Thinking in bursts at a time, but they're not thinking about the opponent's best responses. They're not evaluating the position correctly. They're not coming back to the original idea phase, right? So Magnus does a very nice job here. He puts the knight in the center. Bishop takes. He takes with the bishop. It's check. And now Magnus has to deal with this. Now in this position, the move f6 could have been played. And here Magnus has bishop takes f6, because if he just retreats, there's knight f3. So there's bishop takes f6 and queen d7 check. And that's the end of the game, because if you block with the queen, I have rook e7 winning the queen. And if you move the king, well, if you move the king, I take the rook, and it's game over in a few moves, because actually I will just come right back and then bring my rook to the back rank. So you have to see the move bishop takes f6 ahead of time. You see, when you give this check, you need to think, okay, f6, oh, I'm in trouble because my bishop has to move, and then knight f3 check and I lose my rook. But that's not true. Which is why all the way back here even, you would need to calculate g4, knight h4, knight e5 takes. If you take with the pawn or the rook, there's knight f3. If g4, knight h4, knight e5, bishop e5 check. But you see, you're getting confused probably. You're like, Levy, slow down. But this is really, truly chess at the highest of levels. You need to get good at making quick 2-3 move plans and thinking about what your opponent's best responses are, right? And stopping yourself from playing some plans. In this game, after king h7, rook e3 was played to prevent this. Now it's very difficult to find a move for black, but personally I think queen g5 is very scary, attacking the pawn on g4, which is exactly what black did. And now white has a couple of options. This is the only threat. I would consider h3, and I would also consider queen to d7, which defends the pawn, attacks the rook, and attacks this. And Magnus played queen d7, a nice aggressive and defensive move. And now I want to take this pawn, but I don't want to lose this, so maybe I would take like bishop takes and then bring my bishop back. What did Magnus do? Played f4, an even better move. He actually kicks the black queen totally out of the position. It has to go back to d8, and he takes, and that's a free pawn, right? So he should take it. He has something better. Bishop f6. Forking the knight and the rook. And that's the end of the game. You see, in this position, I saw that I can take a free pawn with really no repercussions. And then I will just come back. I will continue to hunt the pawns. Everything in black's position is bad. Bishop can come here, removing the rook from the defense of that pawn. That move probably also wins. But Magnus saw that before he captures, he needs to look at the most forcing moves on the board. Checks, captures, attacks. And f4 is an attack on the most powerful black piece. You know the response is going to be here because otherwise the queen is trapped. And you can calculate this entire sequence of moves actually relatively easily. Because, I mean, it's just instinct. You're like, oh, I want to take this. Like, I can't take like this because of this, so I'm going to take like this. But you don't want to prove yourself right. That's just your first idea. Of course, if you're playing a blitz game, a 1-minute game, a 3-minute game, you need to play fast. Yes, I completely understand. Totally. However, if you're trying to play the right way, then, right? This is the way it works. You have to be able to stop for a moment. You have a decent amount of time. You have to find moves like this and go, okay, well, then the queen's going to go there. Then I'm going to take, and bishop f6. Checks, captures, attacks. For yourself, the best responses for your opponents. And now we're just getting started with how to make a plan. In this example, we had improving your pieces, targeting enemy weaknesses. So we targeted weaknesses throughout the game. And then ultimately, the knight on h4 was a big weakness. The dark squared bishop dominated. Anticipating opponents' responses. And exchanging pieces, the right trades to make. And then a very nice example at the end of exploiting piece position and coordination. F4 is an extremely high-level move. And being able to calculate this kind of 2-3 move sequence here is tough because it's so easy, as I said, to just take the pawn on c7, and you probably will win the game. But the best move is likely f4. It's more forcing and results immediately in the loss of material for black.